for joining us this evening for our very first annual general meeting for Climate Action King. Just so you know, this meeting is being recorded, so if you don't wish to be on the record, you can make sure that you have your camera off. All right, so to start just with a quick agenda, I'm going to have a quick introduction, and then we're going to get right into our presentation from our keynote speaker, Prashant Pathak, the chairman of the Kingbridge Innovation Center, or Innovation Hub rather. Then we'll have some time for questions, and then we'll actually start the annual general meeting, and you're all invited to stick around for that if you are interested. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Like I mentioned, this meeting is being recorded, so make sure that you have your camera off if you don't want to be on the record. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat. And we will have questions time for questions at the end of the presentation. So if you can hold your questions till then, that would be terrific. And then finally, if you could please make sure that you have your mic muted if you're not talking. That would really help everybody be able to hear everything a little bit better, and it just makes for a much more smooth presentation. So I wanted to start by just having a quick land acknowledgement. So we do acknowledge that the Township of King sits within the treaty lands and territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the William Treaties First Nation, as well as the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee people. And we recognize that Indigenous communities are disproportionately impacted by climate change, and their traditional systems have a lot to teach us about our relationship to land and climate. And in the spirit of reconciliation, I really invite everybody to take some time to reflect on your own relationship with the land, and take some time to learn more about the Indigenous people that have been here since time immemorial. There's some really terrific resources. There's courses that are available online, things like the Indigenous Canada course that's free through Coursera. I believe it's the University of Alberta that puts on that course. If you have the time to be able to take it, I really encourage you to. It provides a really fantastic context. It provides like a long history and a lot more information about what the challenges that Indigenous people face today. And so, yes, I invite you to take that course. So we are Climate Action King. We are a fairly new group. We're a volunteer group here in King Township, and our mission is to inspire, encourage, and support transformative climate action in King Township and lead by example as well. So to start, our keynote presentation. So we have Prashant Pathak with us here. He's the chairman of the Kingbridge Innovation Hub. He's the CEO of Ectigrata Incorporated, a Canadian principal investment firm. He's the chair and owner of the Kingbridge Center and the driving force behind the establishment of the Kingbridge Innovation Hub. The Innovation Hub is focused on supporting high-impact solutions for transformation and sustainability in agriculture, food, water, wastewater, renewable energy, and resilient communities. In addition to his oversight roles at public and private companies, he also serves on the boards of several public and community institutions, including the Mars Discovery District and chair of the Innovation Economy Council. So that's quite the resume there. So I'm really excited to invite Prashant to speak with us today. And I will turn it over to Prashant.
Thanks, Kate. Am I coming through fine? Can people hear me? Okay, excellent. Thank you, Kate, for having us, and thanks, Councillor Schaefer. I think I got co-opted into this because I want to say probably 6 months ago, she and I and Councillor Eek were having conversations about a whole bunch of things, including sustainable farming and things of that nature, and how they delve into some of our business activities and investments that we make here in Canada and internationally. And that led to, follow-on conversations with, your mayor, Pellegrini, and he and I have had some provocative discussions on a few of the ideas he has on climate action. And I kind of partly in a joking way, but partly purposefully to provoke him, I gave him certain facts and statistics. So what I've done is, in preparation for this, Councillor Schaefer and Mary and I had a couple of calls to how to frame the dialogue. It's very hard to. I feel these conversations need to be had as dialogues, whether it's climate or sustainability or issues with regards to ecological and environmental issues, versus an expert-based view. Why is that important? The reason that is important is these are issues which have a concept of commons. And if you go back and study economic history, the tragedy of the commons is the core reason why we globally, internationally, COP26 have had the lack of clarity on what actions to take where you can unify people, because by definition, if there is a common piece of land, what may be favorable behavior for one individual or one community may actually be unfavorable for the other. So that's the reason why I framed this. I told Councillor Schaefer that I said I'll frame these as provocations, and then we open up and we can have a few questions and answers with regards to how can a community that is aware, energized like you guys, and excited about doing these things, harness its collective energy and commitment to do something which is impactful. So provocation one, and some of the provocation actually, before I go there, Councillor Shiva asked me on COP26, like, what are some of the observations given? We had a few folks involved. I didn't go myself this year, but overall, as you all know, the COP26 had a lot of news releases and fanfare around it, but really, they didn't achieve a lot of success. There's only one thing I would say very bluntly that came out, which was not even talked about, but that was the only major impact COP26 had this year. And that is, if any of you guys want, you should read Article 6 and Article 6.4 specifically, which is where they said, maybe we need to think through how to build this voluntary carbon trading mechanism and make it acceptable across all of the global geographies, and make it easier for voluntary carbon offset programs or actions such that we can create a market mechanism for them. And funnily enough, that didn't really get as much of the time as it could have or it should have for various reasons, which I'll not bore you with. So, and that's where, when we were preparing for this conversation, I told Councillor Schaefer, I said, I'll share it with three provocations. So provocation one on climate issues or sustainability issues is, the mistake we all make is market-driven innovations will never yield a solution to problems that have been market-caused on issues of environment, issues of sustainability, issues of climate. What do I mean by that? Because there is a discourse happening at the higher level, call it politically or regulatory-wise, the market participants, who generally have a short or at best medium-term view, they will always take that view and try and influence the status quo for market's benefit. So specifically, if you take very, very narrow areas, like the manner in which the EV adoption is proceeding in the world, the manner in which digital adoption is proceeding in the world, nobody has done the systematic thinking to say, how do you take this thing forward in a manner in which things are in energy balance? That the discussion is not about conversion, as I call it, but the discussion is about conservation and consumption. And those are very, very important things. So a market-based approach will focus on conversion, but a holistic approach will say conversion is one aspect of the problem, but the bigger issues that we need to tackle are issues around conservation and the issues around consumption. Why is that important? It's important. I'll give you one analogy, which is, I don't care what you do with conversion of, let's say, fossil fuels to electric fuels, electric vehicles or electric fuels-based batteries or whatever, vehicles, motors, anything. If as a race or as a community or as individuals, what we are doing is, and this is the provocation I shared with Councillor Schaefer, is I said, let's say you have a bar of butter and you have to cut that bar of butter. It doesn't matter whether I use a gas chainsaw or an electric chainsaw if I'm cutting that piece of butter, because the energy inefficiency or efficiency in that exercise, it behooves us to question the issues around energy conservation and energy consumption for a specific piece of action. And I use that analogy purposefully to be making the point, like, in realistic life terms, do we do things like that? No, but there are elements of that we do. And we as societies have learned it. For example, the efficiency of electric heating versus natural gas heating. The engineers amongst you guys, you know exactly how the math of that works. When you look at transmission and distribution losses in wheeling electricity from the place it's generated to where it is consumed, versus little to no losses when you are wheeling natural gas through pipelines or whatever. So that's kind of one provocation, which is thinking through market innovations, but using them in a manner where we are taking a far longer sustainability view of a community or a region that is over 20, 25, 30 years. And that's extremely important. So look at the 3 C's as opposed to the 1 C of conversion. Look at the consumption patterns, look at the conservation, how that feeds into it. And that can go not just in energy, it can go into water, it can go into wastewater, it can go into usages of plastics. And another example I'll give you, this is something which we engaged with a couple of guys in the Danish government on. The use of single-use plastics. And Mayor Pellegrini and I have had this chat, and he was a bit aghast when I said this. I said, Mayor, do you understand that sometimes cities have made this biggest mistake of banning single-use plastics without figuring out what's the alternate? If the alternate is paper or cloth or denser plastics, and people are using it in the wrong manner, you're actually worse off, because you'll have to use that paper bag several hundred times and that reinforced plastic bag several thousand times in order to get the same footprint. And is somebody managing that and measuring it? Guess what? When the Danish government commissioned the study, they actually came to the reverse conclusion, which is it was a waste handling problem. It was a waste habitual problem of throwing away the plastic that was actually creating a bigger ecological footprint, which they were trying to replace with paper. But with paper, the problem was reuse is low, and then you're going upstream in the value chain with regards to usages of water and wastewater, where you're not, measuring the actual GHG impact of that. So that's kind of, a path link to it. So that translates into the second point I want to make, which is when we are looking at sustainability issues or climate issues, as you guys as a community are looking at very proactively, which is highly reassuring. The 3 comments I would give you is analyze every decision you make or every initiative you adopt or every innovation you back by what I call these 3 R's. What's the reasonableness of the innovation? What's the rigorous total energy impact or the total ecological impact of the innovation or a solution or a process change? And what's the rationality around it? And what I mean by that is I'll give you an analogy, which is often a lot of people, including people like my old firm where I worked, McKinsey & Company, very smart people. They advise all the governments in the world. They will look at the data at a very high level. When they look at the data at a very high level, they'll make a conclusion. For example, one conclusion they made on the agricultural food chain in places like India was, the food chain is highly inefficient. Why? Because from the time the food gets grown in the farm to the time it hits the end market, it is going through these 7 or 8 intermediaries. And because of that, the intermediaries are a problem. So what we should do is create these large buying organizations at the farm and then make sure they retail straight to the end. So the problem was defined as improving supply chain efficiency by eliminating the intermediary. But nobody spent the time really to think through to say, who are the intermediaries? What are they doing? What are the other social impacts and sustainability impacts that we may be upsetting? So in one specific narrow example, the majority of the intermediaries in this community were actually working women who were the best handlers, and they used to aggregate, process, and transport a lot of the farm produce to the wholesale, purchase centers from where it went into retail. So looking at a narrow area of supply chain efficiency, where you essentially had a religious outlook to say supply chain efficiency is the mantra, you essentially ended up creating a more adverse problem, which will take years and years to address, because who's going to look after, the whole notion of women employment? Will these people get repurposed? What are the other societal impacts that are going to be created because of, the children and the households that depend on it? So the point I'm trying to make is, when we look at these larger sustainability issues, there has to be a macro analysis on any innovation, smart idea, or process improvement. And then you really have to get down to the macro level and say, where is it going to be fitting into our supply chain, fitting into our consumption patterns, fitting into our handling patterns? So those 3 R's are very, very important. The third kind of message I'll convey to you is, and this is kind of more informed, having read some of the presentations you have made. I read your city's kind of plan, the CCAPO's climate action plan, the 100-page document I think you guys as a city have produced, which is commendable. I would encourage that this group needs to, today itself, start talking of going beyond emissions, because I saw a significant emissions orientation that you all have taken, and good for you for doing that. But my kind of submission to you all will be, given you're already aware at this level, I would say push the dialogue to be way beyond emissions. And what I mean by that is, emissions is just capturing something that is linked to the fossil industry. There's a whole bunch of things as a collective society, community that we need to think about. And one data point, I don't know if I shared this in our prep calls or not, but I was telling people, I said, people came to me and said, oh, isn't it nice that we are doing a lot of this streaming during the pandemic, so the actual energy consumptions are going down. I said the energy consumption are going down for a different reason, because that's the transportation chain. And at the COP26, this is one of the corrections that Article 6 has done, which is notion of elimination and double counting should be separate, and the notion of consumption should be separate. What happened during that period was, what if I told you there was a 16% of the internet energy usage was explained by Netflix streaming services? Forget everything else. Forget Zoom, forget WebEx, forget Google Meet. 16% of the energy spike just happened because people like you and I, all of us, were potentially on our couches and we were stream watching our favorite shows. So the point I'm trying to make is, we really have to think through that emissions problem at much more than just energy production perspective, because energy consumption is happening in places that are so far removed that often, we're not seeing the visible footprint impact of it till the time, let's say, a Netflix or a Google search or even a Microsoft starts telling us that, saying, oh, by the way, or Apple on their phone says, by the way, the 16 TikTok videos that you just watched, they contributed, 10 kg extra to carbon. They tell that to a millennial. I tell my children, I said, are you thinking about that from that perspective? Or you are seeing your classroom discussions more from saying, we should go back to the point number one I made, which is the conversion of the energy grid problem. So I'm not saying that that shouldn't be done, but what I'm saying is we have to look at it in a much more comprehensive manner. And the third point, which I was giving to you guys as a challenge to say, in King City, in the York region, can we actually take the debate much further from just emissions to say, we're going to be looking at the UN SDG requirements, which are sustainability goals that are far more encompassing. And that relates to, I'll bring you back to Kingbridge, which is where I am chair, and I was telling your mayor and Councillor Eek and Schaefer that we feel very privileged in a way that as a family, we are custodians and stewards of an asset like that, which essentially can be positioned to demonstrate a lot of how you build sustainable economic systems. And some of the work which we've been pushing, our team of Karen and Lisa Gilbert, who's a general manager there, is thinking through economic sustainability, economic prosperity, which is being done in a manner in which, as the population grows, we don't have an issue of haves and have-nots from a direct energy or an embedded energy standpoint. Because if you go back to the core of economic history, embedded energy is often a key predictor of how economic prosperity diverges in societies. And what I mean by embedded energy is people's ability to have clean, pure drinking water, people's ability to have access to transport, people's ability to have, comfort in their home heating, their ability to have a digital internet and things of that nature. And that then translates into a whole bunch of economic access, whether you call it education, knowledge, skill building, and things of that nature. So that kind of is the kind of takeaway I'll leave you guys with, saying, what are the actions that CAK and the city can be doing such that when you guys get to your 35,000 population, I think 2030, or I may get the dates wrong, but 2030, 35, you guys are projecting to add these 8,000 to 9,000 people. And in order to get there, the city alone has to bring down about 630,000 kilograms of carbon. And then the rest of the community has to bring it down by probably about, I don't want to give you a wrong number, but the number was like probably 200 to 150 to 200,000 tons is what you need to bring down if you want to meet your 45% goals. So I looked at the number and I worked backwards from there, and I said, if you want to hit your 45% target, this group probably needs to brainstorm and say, how are we going to generate the ideas where we go after the consumption issues and we go after the conservation issues, because those are easier hurdles to tackle, and you're not beholden to the rate of adoption, the scale of adoption, and the build out of the infrastructure, whether it is on electrification or things of that nature. So given that there's a 9 to 10 year runway, if you want to achieve the target, you want to exceed it, because whatever the population is today, 24, 25,000 people, their consumption has to come down on a per capita basis, and emissions linked to that have to come down. And then you have to compensate for the remainder 8,000. So I'm going to pause there, but that's kind of the challenge this group has to take. And as opposed to just throwing out the challenge, I shared with Councillor Schaefer, I said, I'll be quite happy to share with you guys some of the early stage experimentation that we have been doing with Kingbridge Innovation Center to say, here are 3 ideas which we can take to market. And I'll quickly touch upon them. Like, one idea we're working on is we threw out to your mayor the challenge that we think we have built the early stage of a black box on how King City can be the leader in Canada to show Canada the way on how Canada can succeed in its 2 billion tree program. Because what we did was we did a control experiment to say, can we responsibly plant 10,000 trees using a small team of 4 people led by 1 individual in 4 weeks? And why is that important? It's important because to plant 1 million trees, you have to think back through the supply chain to say, how many seedlings do I need? What kind of seedlings? Are they endemic species or non-endemic species? If they're endemic species, where are the tree farms for that? And one provocation I'll tell you is, today in Ontario, we don't have endemic tree farms that can supply. If King City took on the challenge tomorrow to say we want to plant 1 million trees in 2022, we don't have the tree farms to supply that. So really thinking through backwards. So that's a challenge we took on. I know you guys have taken the challenge of pollinators and supporting pollinators. We said, can you actually do proliferation of pollinators in a box? So we started an experiment in March or April of last year. The challenge we gave our team was, in 6 months, we need to run the experiment, document it, see what the outcome of the pollinators are, and what is the playbook that we can then develop and say, okay, we can collaborate with the city or the local community or the church or the school boards or whatever, and say, if you have to replicate it 10x or 100x, how do you do it in the region? And the same thing around, with the Mycological Society, we did a piece of work around fungi, because, for those of you who have interest in biochemistry and the like, I'm an engineer, but I have a fascination in a lot of these things where the notion of how fungi attachment to certain trees are actually critical for carbon sequestration, because the rate of sequestration increases based on certain fungi. So we did those 3 experiments as I said, as an institution in your community, which we feel hugely privileged to be owners of and shepherds of, as I told your mayor. And the question you're saying is, is there a way to take it 10x or 100x? Because the rough math I had done this morning in preparation for this is, I think we'll have to up our game as every individual in King Township. And I see myself as a member there because we spend time there and we have more than 35 employees there. 83x has to be our improvement. And I'll get the numbers a bit wrong, but that's the dent we need to make individually and collectively to comfortably say that when 2030 arrives, we will be way ahead of our 45% goal. So I'll stop there because, you know, it's very hard to, I prefer doing this more interactively, but we are doing it on Zoom. So I'll stop there and we should have an open conversation. Kate.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. That's like a lot to digest. Yes, I can see some clapping from the audience. It's yeah, on the online format, it really limits how much we can applaud. So I do want to open the floor for questions. I don't see anything in the chat right now, but I do know that we have some folks that have some burning questions. So please, by all means, you can put them in there, or in the spirit of having a discussion, if you're comfortable with maybe saying your question out loud, I think that would be quite fine as well.
And Kate, I'm very comfortable if somebody wants to ask an anonymous question, because climate issues are very contentious. I'll be perfectly comfortable if somebody says, I want to ask something anonymously. It will not offend me. I've shared with Councillor Schaefer and even with your mayor. I remember he and I had an interesting dialogue when I pushed him and I said, I hope you're not going to ban plastic bags like John Tory did, because I showed him the data. And I said, you actually made our city worse because you didn't teach us how to recycle or reuse our paper bags. And now we have, it's like the, you know, many other issues that you take one data line and you point and you draw the line and you end up with a bad outcome. So you can ask anonymously if somebody is uncomfortable asking an awkward question. I think Anne has got her hand up.
I just realized I should just unmute and say hello. Thank you for your talk. I guess I wondered if you've looked at King Township. What would you consider to be what we call the low-hanging fruit, as far as looking at not adaptation just now, not at the co-benefits just now, not at equity? Perhaps we need to always look at equity, pardon me, but also at not just putting aside the economic benefits that will come with climate action, and of course, the cost analysis that says doing nothing or only a little will cost us more. So setting those aside, and adaptation is big, but let's just look at the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. What would you consider would be one or two of the largest low-hanging fruit things, noting that our largest emissions come from transportation and buildings? Yeah.
So I'll give you three responses, Anne. You're right, your biggest ones come from transportation and buildings. The transportation one, here are two or three ways to think about it, which is if there was a data that was available to us, which we could, and this is a challenge in transportation, especially in residential communities, which is how do you get the data on traffic patterns and who goes from where to where, because you are in a way infringing now on a very tricky area of digital science called privacy on, you know, people's transport patterns and driving patterns. But the simplest thing we could do, add on this, which I can send you the statistics for it somewhere, which is if we can build awareness on two things, literally two things. One is idling, vehicle idling. And then the second thing is vehicle heating and air conditioning. There is data available that you can drive the same number of miles, but if you just reduce those two metrics, you essentially are driving down high single digit to even double digit emissions from the same engine. Now, different engines, depending on the brand of your car, and I don't want to name and shame, certain brands will be better, other brands will be worse. So assuming, and that's why I said, the conversion debate is settled in the sense that electric vehicles pollute less than fossil fuel vehicles. So that problem is licked, and at some point in time, the adoption diffusion curve will take over and things will happen. But until it happens, just building that to awareness point actually starts driving behavioral change in people, idling and temperature control in the cars, or call it internal environment control, drives engine efficiency. So that's kind of, one aspect of it. Second aspect of it, simple things like, can you motivate everybody in the township to say, I'm going to drive only nitrogen-filled tires? It's available. It's in Canada. It's everywhere. And people have done the data. Nitrogen-filled tires drives mileage efficiency. If it drives mileage efficiency and drives and increases your useful life of your tires, you are now reducing your over the useful life of that piece of rubber. You're reducing your GHG impact. On the energy and building side, and I saw a lot of the work you guys are doing on essentially your R factors in the building, insulation and heating and all that stuff. I think that will continue to go a fairly long way. The question there I would provoke and say, if I read the logarithmic chart correctly, there are probably 5, call it, users or pieces of infrastructure that are above your 100,000 kilowatt hour. Like, you have a very steep curve. When I saw the Tri-Sand Center, maybe one of your community centers in Nobleton or something. So there are like 6 buildings I counted, and in your city. And I said, we just need to focus on those. Can we look at even a DG solution, a specific distributed generation solution to essentially do peak shaving, or to reduce the T&D losses that we may be facing because we are wheeling in electricity from a further distance. And the DGs could be usage of geothermal. The DGs could be usage of solar. So that, again, is a solved problem. It's more of an application orientation, literally on that. But the third thing tied to GHG is, I still continue to believe the asset that King City and the York region have, which we have not captured and monetized correctly, if I use that word monetized from a carbon or a GHG perspective, and is we really need to document to say, we are having a bunch of emissions. The question is, where is our sequestration happening? Because the amount of forest cover or ecological cover that we have as a township is quite healthy. And the question is, if you grow that cover, what we need to do in terms of growing that cover, measuring the cover, auditing that cover, to really start linking back to say, if we did this and reduce transportation by X, Y, or Z, we may actually be ahead of the game in reducing their transportation emissions, but being ahead in terms of more sequestration.
Awesome. I can see that we do have another question in the chat here. And so this person is asking, I'm curious as the best approach to reducing single-use plastics.
So the best, you're talking about as a city now, or at a, maybe I'll clarify the question, as a community of users, or now you're talking at a national level, because there are 2 different answers depending on how you react to it.
Answer both.
Okay, so I think at the higher level, this whole single-use plastics is a very, very tough, economic problem. And why is it a tough economic problem? Is because you'll have to really go back and see kind of, from the valuation of the petrochemical industry to say, are they providing actually a net benefit or a net loss? Because, when you get into the fractional distillation tar, and I have a little bit of an engineering background, you're actually making use of certain parts of that fractional distillation tar for fuel. Then there's some things which are going for other products, and a bunch of the hydrocarbons get converted into plastics. So now the question comes is, what is the fundamental single-use plastics problem? So the conversion of a molecule into a single-use plastic by itself is not the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is we are unable to find a way to be efficient users of the product that comes out. And that goes back into replacement of, and the biggest area is basically packaging. You can use packaging as a sick code, where the facility with which you can deploy it relative to alternates, whether it's paper-based or other biological-based, is where the displacement has happened over the last I would say probably 60 to 70 years. So that's where at the industry level, you have to debate those changes and say, from a demand perspective, from a packaging industry demand perspective, what are the alternates and substitutes that we have for that, such that those mechanisms can essentially be at equilibrium, or you can say relative to plastic on a total footprint basis, we may be better using viscose or paper or bamboo or things of that nature. And that goes into, who will ask the question, that goes into the actual debate of the marginal social cost of plastic, it's a price of carbon, and what the price of carbon is. Coming down to a community level, I think the biggest thing I believe on the whole single-use plastic is a behavioral game, which is, and you guys are the wrong audience to be talking about a behavioral game, because you are here self-selected because your behaviors are already in that direction. But for a lot of people, either for awareness or their perceived inconvenience, or they just have not connected the dots on the fact that a use of a single-use plastic that ends up in your waste bin and then is not properly recycled is a huge impact on the environment. So you can still bring item 3 to awareness, which is at a community level. I think that's where we'll have to build the mechanisms to drive awareness, reduce the inconvenience, and develop a closed loop chain, which is like, is there a way for me to segregate these things in my municipal waste that I collect, or can I actually use this as part of the MSW Municipal Solid Waste Program? And then you guys have already done it well. Like, I read that you guys have your energy from waste plant. It's not in King City. I think it is somewhere in the Durham region or wherever it is. But you are already a step forward in the sense that even if you use a single-use plastic, there's a way by which you're recovering at least a significant amount of the heat product out of it in the EFW plant you have. But the biggest issue really is, I believe, is the awareness building, reuse of that, and then handling it in the waste stream in a much, much more responsible manner. And whoever asked the question, and just for fun, I'll share with you. I think the single-use plastic may be a thing of the past, and I'll just make that as a provocation. I think the problem that we're going to be dealing with is how we handle the blown plastic that has ended up in the masks, and the number of masks that we have used over the last 3 years as a society across the world, and some of them are making their way into the wrong places, into our waste streams, into our land, fills and things of that nature. So the blown fabric of the mask is an equally large problem that we'll be dealing with in the immediate near future.
Okay, actually, as a follow-up to that, we have a longer question that's in the chat here. So I'm going to attempt to do this question justice. So it says your comment on single-use plastics and how Toronto needs to do a better job teaching people how to recycle was interesting. You often hear of the vast quantities of recycling that end up in landfill due to contamination, so the wrong items in recycling. Besides trying to teach citizens better recycling habits, are there better waste management companies who do a more rigorous screening or sorting process to ensure less recycling ends up in landfill due to mistakes made by citizen? If it has a higher contract cost, can our politicians sell this based on the lower costs we will incur through climate change costs? So I guess talking about the different companies that we could use that could help mitigate that contamination issue.
Yeah. So I think who had asked the question, I think there are 3 parts to it, and it is the right question, which is, you could argue that there is call it a political will issue, and I'll let the politicians respond to their willingness or not, and how serious they are on the climate priorities. But the waste handling is a 3-part problem, and as a family business, we operate some waste facilities on the wastewater side, and energy from waste technology. So there are 3 parts to it. So one part is what is just the waste segregation problem, I think the individual mentioned in the question. Mm-hmm. And the poor segregation, either at the household level or at the collection level, creates a problem. This should be a problem that should be owned by the waste management company. And this is a market mechanism. That's why I said we should use market mechanism to solve market problems. So the expectation should be, when you go out and sign up Waste Management International or Republic Waste or GFL or whoever, it should be their onus, because what are we doing today? We probably pay tipping fees to pick up our waste. So there is revenue out the door as a city. Now the person gets a feedstock. And if they are taking that feedstock and converting that into energy, probably they're going to get a revenue from the energy. So you have a tipping fee revenue, you have a energy production revenue. And then probably if it's a EFW plant, there may be other revenues coming from other solid waste residue, whether it is iron or steel or aluminum or everything else that goes into it. So I think embedded in the question was the whole issue that are the pricing mechanisms being truly enforced, or you have the private sector, and I say this with full admission of the fact that we are a private sector operator, is a private sector actually not bearing the full cost and actually pushing the onus on segregation, either to the waste generator or the nature of the contract that they have with the municipal counterparty or whatever. So that's item one. Item two, Kate, on that question is, this will go back into the whole price of carbon or the price of waste. Because there are places in Europe where today we have the boxes, right? And we pay, at least in Toronto, if you buy a big box, you pay slightly higher, but you buy a small box, the small waste bin, you pay less. The issue is, should there be a weight requirement? Should there be, should be, the polluter pays argument, which is if you produce more waste, you should be paying more. And then there is a whole thinking around, if you develop that, how do you develop that? Would you need to have waste pickups that have weighing scales, and you use those weighing scales at your real-time billing? Because now you're then going to be driving behavior on reducing waste generation at the source. And in the UK, one area where I remember very well, we looked at a utility where on the wastewater side, when you're billing for wastewater separately, guess what? It drives a change in behavior. Most places only bill water, but when you bill water and you bill wastewater, it immediately drives a change in behavior. You could do that same thing with solid waste. So coming back to single-use plastic, that is one part of the problem, but there's many things beyond single-use plastic. You have, you have corrugated cardboards, you have reinforced cardboards, not all of which can go into the recycling stream. All of those are ending up in landfills today. So it was a long question, but I hope I answered the 2 or 3 key issues which I captured, Kate.
Absolutely. And I just want to pass it over to Angelo. I see that you have your hand up. If you're comfortable unmuting and sharing your question, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to ask the question, and thank you for your presentation. Very insightful. I wondered a lot about what's your thoughts on rewarding proper behavior in terms of recycling, in terms of reusing, in terms of people making decisions on what they're doing with and what they're buying. What's your thoughts on maybe rewarding things? I don't mind telling you, but when I was a kid, I used to go around and pick up pop bottles because I used to get 2.5 cents. And then I found out that if I got a jug of milk, I actually got 25 cents. So I used to go hunting for the jugs of milk. And you know what? I didn't even know that I was recycling and help recycle at that time, because all I was doing is trying to figure out how to get a few extra dollars to buy candies that were probably not good for me. But what's your thought in terms of maybe making things more rewarding? So if I buy something at Foodland, maybe there should be some kind of reward or reimbursement if I bring something back that they're going to recycle. Maybe if I buy a box of Coke or whatever they're selling, maybe the products that they sell there, maybe if you bring them back, there should be some kind of reward. Maybe we should be thinking about, and I'm going to bring this up again, I know it's not very popular, but maybe we should be thinking of rewarding people to get into the EV cars and giving them a reward or a tax rebate or something for getting into those. Same thing with using different methods of heating your house. Maybe that would be a way to do it. there are many, many ways that we can help people to do the conservation and the climate change. So what's your thought about doing something like that?
Yeah. So, and you know, very interesting observation. If you give me the flexibility, what I would do is I'll parse your word reward into three different mechanisms where you used it, and I'll tell you why. The example you gave about reward for collecting the pop cans and the pop bottles or the jug of milk, that, if you think about it, was actually what you use the word reward, but that was actually creating a mechanism, a compensation mechanism. And I'll tell you why parsing it is very, very important, because you're onto something extremely critical where some of the more evolved Scandinavian European countries are further ahead than us on it. There you created, call it a pricing mechanism for a certain activity that was not happening otherwise and would be done far more efficiently by an alert, aware, or a conscious or an interested kid going around. And I'm using that, I'm just playing on an analogy. It need not be a kid. In places like Thailand, Bangladesh, India, there is a whole sector of people who are called rag pickers. I'm sure you've heard of the articles, in National Geographic. That's all they do. It's an industry. So that's kind of one mechanism. And I would say more of those mechanisms are good, especially when the existing mechanisms are either inefficient or don't exist at all. So that's one aspect. The second aspect, when you use the notion of reward, which is rewarding people to accept a certain kind of an innovation. Now that's a much more of a nuanced and a very tricky area to be in. And what I mean by that is, what we have learned from in that area is a reward-based intervention actually creates disincentive in the market providers of that reward to drive for efficiencies. And that's been the lesson learned in all of Europe on the whole solar wafer supply chain. It's only now after 30 or 40 or 50 years, when you took out the mechanism, that suddenly the solar panel prices dropped to a level at which we were seeing energy production parity. So I would say that area, it has to be a much more deliberated, nuanced discussion saying, is the reward for adoption or is the reward for cost parity? And those can lead to very, very different outcomes, because you don't want the second one, because you want the adoption to be happening, but happening at an economically competitive pace and an economically competitive level, keeping the marginal social cost in mind. So that's kind of the second aspect. The third thing is, when you talked about heating and all those other areas of comforts of life, there I would say we have to be very careful, Angela, because we don't want to reward people to be doing things because we feel they're environmentally and ecologically better than the alternate, because we don't want to incent increased consumption. A big problem we have in our society today is the consumption problem. So rewarding people to consume things just because you believe they're environmentally sound is actually incenting bad behavior. So that's why I said you use the reward in those three different analogies, but they're not equivalent. That's what I kind of challenge Angela and say, do we want? So let me give you an example. So let's say we started magically producing water with 100% renewables, and we were a closed loop society, and only the township of King existed. Because it is coming out with fully renewable energy, do we want to reward using that water versus the water that comes from somewhere else, and that leads to water wastage? We don't. So that's the issue where I said, incenting consumptive behavior, we don't want to reward, period.
That's really interesting. I don't think I've really thought of it like that before, but yeah. I realize that we're getting a little late in the evening, so I thought I would maybe just open it up to anybody who has maybe one last question. I don't want to keep everybody into the wee hours, so if anybody has one last question, if you're comfortable unmuting yourself. I see Keith is wiggling
Well,
his hand.
No, look, I can always ask questions, but Lewis has a question, so let's go with Lewis's question.
Oh, I did. Sorry. Thank you. And it's Jennifer. Unfortunately, I can't figure out how to change my son's name.
Oh.
Sorry. I was just wondering about thoughts on changing the heating systems in homes away from fossil fuels. Do you have any thoughts on the value of that?
I think, sorry, I didn't get the name, but and this is where I said the energy balance equations and the science is done, right? Electric heating, less than 30% efficient if you start from the source, right? From where the electricity got generated, how it got transmitted, how it came to your home. And once it is at your home and you convert it to a heating element, it's 100% generation of that electric energy into heat energy, but you've already lost a lot of energy coming into your home. And the analogy I gave is when you use, let's say, natural gas, you end up in a much better place because the losses on the pipeline are far, far lesser. And you probably, let's say, lose 10, 15, 20% of your heat in the home for other reasons. And I think the question really goes back to is there a way you can be looking at distributed energy sources that are equally efficient? And this is where, like, the whole notion of DG is a very interesting area, because distributed generation without any transmission means you're generating the power or the energy or the heat at source. So, people talk about heat pumps, they talk about geothermals and things of that nature. So those are very well regarded, well known, and established modalities. The question really is, from a DG perspective or a distributed installation perspective, how do you build a supply chain for that? Because one home in one community with one user will be an interesting story. But the question is, can we aspirationally, as King City, I just noticed actually Mayor Pellegrini, I'm thinking, can we go to a developer? Let's say we go to Nick Cortellucci and say, Nick, is there a way we can design something where we will show an economically viable heat pump for development X? Because then you start really making a difference because you are doing it at scale. And the adoption and transmission of these benefits really happens when you start doing them at scale. Otherwise, what will happen is we will not be able to drive behavior for widespread adoption that moves the needle. And a bunch of the people, not you guys, and that's what I'm trying to impress on is, it's not, so people who are aware are 10%. Then those 10% have to influence 70%. And there may be people who will never switch, but it's the center mass of any population distribution that has to be switched. And they generally switch when you have network effects, which means they see more people using it. It's a classic fax machine problem, right? A person with one fax machine finds it very useless, but a person who sees fax machine being used by 100 people finds it very useful.
Yeah, that concept of scale, that's our big challenge. You've given us a lot to digest. There's so much in there to unpack. And that's just amazing. I'm really grateful to also see that in the chat, there's been some really great discussion that's been going on in the chat, and I haven't been able to really highlight all of that, but that's fantastic to see. Thanks everybody for chiming in. Yeah, I think, Keith, I think I'm going to pass it over to you.
Yep, I'm here. So my job, Prashant, is to thank you for the talk, and I think that's pretty easy to do. I always enjoy talks that include lots of provocations. It's a good way to test the thesis that you currently have on the best way forward on 1,000 different fronts. So I'm always looking for great talks like that, and different ways to look at that big picture, small picture, community, international level. Really, really informative, really helpful. And I really appreciate that. As a thank you, the current board of Climate Action King is going to make a donation to the King Innovation Hub. And more importantly, however, is you're going to get a free membership, which everybody wants. So you're now a member, and we really appreciate you taking the time today to come and chat with us. And with that, I think we're going to move to our AGM and back to Kate, right?
Keith, if I may, one challenge I'll give you and your board and everybody else, and Anne and whoever else is on the board, Debbie and whoever I can see, I think we should take it on ourselves. And since I saw the mayor here briefly, yeah, no, he's still here. Yeah, is we should take it on ourselves as a city. Article 6 is clarified now. Why should we be, I'm talking about COP26, why shouldn't we be the first city in Canada that adopts Article 6, where we can provide auditable, visible, measurable NDCs that we can tell the government of Canada saying, you government of Canada, pay us for it. Because you guys are a small community, you can't raise your taxes up to a point, like you can raise it, but not. But if you can audit that and Climate Action King can create that team, we'll be happy to work with you guys and say, here is the kind of auditable model that King Township has. And we go and meet the Environment Minister in Ottawa and say, King Township needs to get a remittance back for the NDCs that we are contributing to Canada's goal.
All right, I like it. I'm glad the mayor's here. All right, Kate.
Thank you, guys.
Right. Thank you so much. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen one more time here. Okay. So you guys are all more than welcome to stick around for our AGM, which we're going to be diving into now. Just to give you a quick agenda for the AGM, we're going to have a welcome and introduce our board. We're going to have an annual report. We're going to have a treasurer's report and budget for this coming year, a membership report, plans for 2022. We're going to talk a little bit about the draft King Climate Action Plan that was recently circulated. And then a bit about a future membership meeting, updates to the Constitution and an election, and that's it. So let's get started. So this is the current Climate Action King executive. We've got Susan as our chair, Anne Rainey as the treasurer, Mary Asselstein as our secretary, and then we have a few members at large, including myself, Kate Goodale, Bruce Craig, Debbie Schaefer, and Keith Beckley as well. And from there, I'm going to pass it over to Susan, our chair, to go over the annual report. Oh, Susan, do we have you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, now we can. Excellent.
Okay, thank you very much. So, hello everyone, my name is Susan and this is our initial annual report. So, we began obviously in 2019, sitting around learning about climate change, and we worked on our vision and our mission, and we became an incorporation because we needed to do that in order to get funding. And we were pretty busy. And we launched our website and opened up our membership registration. So we actually launched in July of last year. We were very busy. One of our most public, well, our one public event was our plug and drive event. And we had over 100 participants. We had 3 dealership cars that were brought with experts, and people could test drive an electrical vehicle. We had almost 20 volunteer people who are passionate about their electric vehicles, and they came and showed them off. And our goal was to have 20% of the participants actually decide to purchase an EV, an electric vehicle. And we very nearly reached that, which is pretty astounding, actually. We're pretty proud of it. Several of us on the board will have decided that our next vehicle will be. We also have very talented Keith, one of our board members, who's very knowledgeable and passionate about heat pumps and electric vehicles, having both of them himself. And he put together 3 webinars on each, once a month. They were well attended, and he answered hundreds of questions. We've had lots of articles in the press. We regularly monitor local, regional, and provincial government, particularly around land planning and climate actions or lack of them. And we really are a pretty successful group, we think. We have good reputation amongst our local government. And I think we've done extraordinarily well, particularly during a pandemic. So now let's go and do more. Thank you, Kate.
Hello, everybody. I don't know if you can hear me, but I know you can't see me. Can you see me? Doesn't matter. It's Anne Rainey here, I'm the treasurer. I'm just going to go over this really quickly. As Susan Baharial has said, we just started in 21. There was no previous year, so there's no comparison of revenue increases and things like that. We, most of our budget was based on donations. Our membership dues that you see there came from after our membership drive. We also had a bake sale, thank you to some lovely volunteers who baked at our test drive event. Our bank charges are really our only administrative expense at this time, and operational expenses have been donations in kind until now. We have a website and we're Zoom hosted. So our largest expense was in advertising, and of that was newspaper ads in various newspapers to advertise our webinars on electric vehicles and on heat pumps, as well as our event and this AGM. We also kept the cost down because of great partnership and being able to use the parking lot, and kindly by King Township partnering with us on that event and other things, advertising on their signs as well as online, I think, but there are other partners. So we still have in the bank $1,210.25 to start our next year. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see that in fact, we only have cash assets and we have no liabilities, current, past, or future. Everything's paid up to date. Thank you. Oh, I guess I'm still on.
You're still on the hook.
So the CAK, we put together a proposed plan for next year, which is very tricky, as you can expect, because we do not know what the level of restrictions will be. We see we're coming out of a wave of Omicron and things are being lifted, but we do not know when or how the next wave will come because the pandemic means around the world and it's still going on. So this is an unknown future. So we have a proposed budget based on a plan that we feel is doable and hope very much that we'll exceed these expectations. We are looking at quite a lot of more money in advertising and promotional. So we're looking at 2 ads roughly in a month, or a large half-page ad. And that would be about $400 a month. We may be doing more promotional as far as ads online, on social media, or printing. But generally speaking, again, we hope to partner with people as much as possible and keep our costs down. Our operational expenses, if we do have to pay for our domain and hosting and such, might be $300. And if we have live meetings, we're hoping again to have great partnership. Bank charges will be $70. So looking at having 3 more interactive events, hopefully in person, and more webinars. We also hope to have articles in papers. And we also know we expect to have some sort of fundraising or membership drive event and the AGM next year. We can do that with the $6,300 or $6,400 So that's the target, and we hope to exceed it. Hope to do more. Thanks, Alex. Any questions? If you do have any questions, you can send them to me in the chat, and we'll carry on then. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So moving on to our membership report. So Mary, I think this is you.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name's Mary, and I am actually the recording secretary, but I've taken on the role of membership secretary for this previous year. I just wanted to let everyone know that we have 23 paid members and 7 members on the executive. We've had quite a contribution from volunteers this year. The executive has worked extremely hard, as Susan has pointed out in her report. But I wanted to make, wanted to reference a few people that I thought have made really notable contributions. And one of them is Keith, who we also noted before, who's done the webinars for us, an excellent job on the webinars. And the 2 others who are not on our executive, just members, Janet Meor and Catherine Fleur, helped with the plug and drive event, and we couldn't really have done it without them. So I just wanted to note those people in particular. This year we have a draft strategic plan for membership, and it includes the considerations such as building the membership, communicating with the membership, marketing events and activities, and documenting volunteer contributions. So that's basically what the draft strategy is outlining. And when we get our new membership secretary, I'm sure we will finalize this strategy and get on with building our membership on such an important issue as climate change. Thank you. That's my report. Oh, sorry, one more thing that I probably should talk about in the context of the election of the membership secretary. The duties of the membership secretary, as will be voted on in the Constitution, are maintains the membership list, collects membership fees, coordinates membership drive, and monitors volunteer participation. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. And then moving to our plans for 2022. And I think, Susan, this is passing over to you.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Well, we have a number of plans, some of which we are already quite involved in. As many of you know, the King Township has now announced, published, posted its draft climate action plan and is asking the public for comments on improving that plan by the 25th of February. It may produce something like a working group on which we would wonder whether you might be interested. We have already volunteered as a group to help support the township as we hope they improve the plan. You will find some useful guides. There's a toolkit from the Suzuki Foundation that will be or is posted on our website that is designed specifically for us, the public, to use to assess municipal climate action plans. And I won't go into detail here, but the King plan has some very obvious differences from the assessment from Suzuki's guidelines. There is also a mayor's, and what's the name of that? The Mayor's Council?
That's the Global Covenant of Mayors. which
Right.
is a national support system for municipalities developing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should talk about that later. Okay, go back into my future. There we go. Okay. We also suggest that you reduce your own footprint, and there are some straightforward links of how to assess what your footprint is now. Now, by you, I mean, it's usually by household, and it asks basic questions like how often do you fly, how many people are in the household, whether you recycle, how do you heat your home, what's the insulation like, all that sort of thing. And out of that, what sort of food you eat and various things. And out of the end of that is a pretty accurate assessment of your family produces X number of tons a year. And then it compares that to other places in Canada and other places in the world. And then it also has, okay, how do I reduce this? So if you don't know what you're producing now, it's a little hard to know how to reduce it. So I really suggest that regardless of what else you do, if you can do something, it's find out what your footprint is and then do what you can to research and reduce it. We will be having, as Anne told you, various events, and we hope webinars for more education. I just got a question asking if the calculate your footprint is only for homes. Go and look it up. It's on our website. I think so, but I don't know. We have been putting out, oh, well, yes. Prashant's talk is about everybody, so it really impacts everyone. I think that the businesses, if they simply put in the right calculations, they can get a good reading too. So we have committed with Mosaic, which is the Art Society King quarterly magazine, to producing 2 articles a year, partnering with concerned citizens of King Township, who are doing the other 2, to do 2 articles about climate change issues. And in fact, you should see one early in March. Now, in terms of can you do something right now? Excuse me. Excuse me. There are 2 grant opportunities available right now, both in King Township, both relatively simple, both with supportive staff to help you fill in the forms. One is a grant from the Sustainability Committee, and it's first come, first served, and they have a total of $20,000. I don't think they would give it out to one application. The other one is due applications by 3/4 of the way through March. And that is a community support, sustainability support grant. And we really, as you can see, have a busy, small board, and a member could easily take this on. We would give some guidance. The staff is there to help you. So we really need some help with that. So if you're looking to do something soon, that'd be great. And no, by doing that, we are not grabbing you for every grant. So it's perhaps you do something and then go away, and then come in and do something and then go away. Next slide, please. So I've already spoken a bit to this. You will find King's plan at that website. There is a very good plan just put out by the nearby community of Caledon to use as a comparison and connect with us, and we'll give you some more information. Next. One of our goals this year is that, as you know, we haven't really engaged the membership as much as we should have or we wanted to, but we were busy doing other things and there was a pandemic. So we plan to have soon a webinar where we want to hear from you. What are your ideas? What do you want us to do? And one thing that has been our vision since the beginning is that perhaps a member would join us because they have a burning idea inside of some project that they want to do here in King to help prevent or stop or whatever climate change. But they can't do it alone, and they would really like to share it with others and get some manpower and perhaps some funding, but we need to raise it first. But we need to hear about that. And so this will be your meeting. We have a bunch of ideas we can share, but we want to hear from you. And that's really important in this day and age. So please stay tuned for more details soon. You'll be getting emails, it'll be on our website, that sort of thing. What's the next slide, Kate? Okay, can we go back a slide?
You sure can.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have a couple more things to say. One of which is that today is International Random Acts of Kindness Day. And today is the 4th day of Canada's Kindness Week, which it apparently legislated last June, is the first country in the world to create one. And given what's going on in Ottawa at the moment, we could certainly use an active kindness week. But I just thought I'd let you know that for fun. One of our kind of phrases that we just recently found is that climate change is not going to stop until we change. With that, I'm moving on. Thank you very much. And thank you. Almost all of you have stayed on since the presentation, and we're really happy that now you know who we are and where we're going. So, and thank you for all your support.
Fabulous. All right. So next, I think we're passing it back over to Mary for some updates to the Constitution. Oh, you're on mute, Mary.
Sorry about that. I have several computers going at the same time and can't remember which mouse is which. We have a constitution that was reviewed and passed some months ago, and it needs to be ratified here at the annual general meeting. But we're also proposing to introduce a new executive position, membership secretary. So the duties of the membership secretary are listed there, and we will just need a motion to create the position and a motion to ratify the duties of the membership secretary. So I will move that we create the membership secretary position in the Constitution.
I will second. Is Anne Rainey?
And before we vote on this, because we have many members here tonight, I was going to do a roll call, and I'm not exactly sure how to do it. Anne or Kate, perhaps you can help. If we go back to the gallery view and away from the slides, then we'll be able to see everybody.
Sure thing. There we go.
Yeah, I don't have a gallery view here. Just hold on.
Your top right there.
Yeah.
For everyone, if you wish a gallery view, you just wave your cursor over the top right and it gives you a choice of views, galleries when we're all the same size.
Okay, so I have the gallery view, and I have a list of the members that were registered to attend this event tonight. So what I'm going to do is call out the names of the membership, and then you can just kind of raise your hand or come off mute and say yes, so that we know that you're here. So the first one is me, so I'm here. Keith, you're here. Susan Baharel's here. Mary Bromley. Okay. Bruce Craig is here.
I'm here, yes.
Thank you. Beverly Flanagan.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Catherine Fleur.
Here.
Kate Goodall.
Here.
Helmut Kruger. No.
Oh, and you're muted if you're.
I'm sorry, he just left the room temporarily. He'll be back. He's been sitting beside me off camera.
Okay.
So he's here, sorry.
That counts.
And Neva Lorenzen.
Here.
Hans Martin.
Yep.
No?
Yeah, there was a lead.
Oh, yes, good. Janet Muir.
Here.
Steve Pellegrini.
I'm here.
Terry Price.
Here.
And you're here. Martha Richardson. No. And Debbie Schaefer's here. Okay.
I'm here.
So those are the voting members. We have a motion to create the position of membership secretary with the roles and responsibilities as listed. And the motion was put forward by me, and it was seconded by Anne. All in favor. You can use the little hand signal thingy. Great, thank you. Just so you know, in terms of the Constitution, a quorum is the members that attend the meeting. So we are automatically a quorum. So now we're going to go into our elections, and we're voting for 4 positions: chair, secretary, treasurer, membership secretary, and members at large. And there are 4 positions for members at large. So we have a slate already for the nominations. So we have Susan Baharel nominated for chair, and I would ask if there's any other nominations for chair. And then Mary Asselstein is nominated for secretary. Any other nominations for secretary? And I have on my screen here, I apologize, treasurer was going to be Catherine Fleur. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other nominations for treasurer? And then membership secretary, We have a nomination of Janet Mior. Are there any other nominations for membership secretary? Members at large, we have Bruce Craig, Debbie Schaefer, Keith Beckley, Kate Goodall, and Anne Rainey. We have 5 people. And I believe there's only 4 positions. Are there any nominations for members at large?
If there's more members nominated than we have positions, I'm willing. I will withdraw my nomination then.
You will withdraw your nomination?
But you're going to see me at the meeting, so I'm saying.
You just can't vote. And that's another point is, sorry, that's me. If anybody can come to the meetings, it's just whether you have a vote or not at the meeting. So Anne has removed herself from the list. So members at large, we have Bruce Craig, Debbie Schaefer, Keith Beckley, and Kate Goodall. Are there any other nominations for members at large? So I move that the slate be accepted. Any seconder? Susan, thank you. Sorry, I'm the secretary too, so I'm doing this as well. Okay, and do we actually have to have a vote on it if there's a slate? Who knows Robert's rules?
They're acclaimed. Unless there's any objection, and I can't remember what kind of special objection it has to be.
Steve, you know Robert's rules. What does Robert's rules say?
As long as each of the individuals accepted their nomination, you just close nominations and that's it. You present the slate.
Perfect. Congratulations, everyone. And I'll hand it back over to Susan.
Terrific. Okay. So, Susan, you're on mute, but I'm just going to quickly just say that this sort of brings us to the end. And thanks everybody for coming. And you do see our website there. So please, you can go to our website, you can register as a member if you're not already registered. And yeah, I'm going to pass it over to Susan if you have any last words, but thanks everybody so much for coming. It's been really great having you here.
So I will say that Anne has kindly said that she will keep the webinar open if people would like to discuss anything or talk on the chat or open up your mute or whatever for a few minutes. Perhaps we could take down the slide so we could do that. There we go. And it's remarkable, we still have 28 people here. So is Prashant still here? No, Prashant's gone. Okay, so